When you heard Ursula von der Leyen's comments, what was your immediate reaction?
That she's just stating the obvious, that rejoining the EU is inevitable. I mean, we knew it would be inevitable from a long time ago. I think back in 2018, it was published that because of how young people tended to vote Remain, old people tended to vote Leave. Peter Kellner even calculated that by 2020, just by pure demographic shift, we would have a Remain voting population, and all the polls back that up. Right now, I mean, you say that people have generally accepted it, we're just going to stick with Brexit, but no. Polls show that by 51 to 32, according to YouGov, we would vote to rejoin the EU. And that's because, again, the polls show that 60% of the population believes that Brexit has made us poorer. And we're in a cost of living crisis. We simply cannot afford this. So, of course, rejoining the EU is inevitable.
So why is it that no British politician, or in fact, well, maybe you can put me right here, I can't think of any leading politician who is advocating this. I mean, obviously the party leaders aren't, but even on the back benches, there may be one or two Liberal Democrats who might go public and say, yes, I think we should rejoin, but even they seem to be quite reluctant to go that far.
It's cowardice. It's because they've seen an election that was fought on Brexit, and even though, as you've heard me say before, the majority did vote for second referendum parties, under this voting system, the Brexit voting party all coalesced under the Tories, and they managed to get a majority of seats, if not a majority of votes. And so it's moral cowardice. They're scared. Well, we can see within the party, the majority of the people in Labour, the majority of the people in Lib Dems oppose Brexit. They want us back in the single market. And that is simply just logical, because every single expert says that it is making us poorer. The government's official experts, so the Office of Budget Responsibility, people who the government rely on to make their decisions, says that Brexit is costing, 4% of our economy, lower than it would have been if not for Brexit. The Bank of England says that it's taking £1,000 from every household in the country during a cost of living crisis. The British Chamber of Commerce says that 56% of UK export businesses have struggled to find it more expensive selling to the EU since
But our
Brexit.
exports have gone up to the EU.
Yeah, they've gone up. They've gone up since we left the EU, but that's largely because of inflation. And as Rishi Sunak himself has admitted, the reason why they haven't gone up as much as other comparable countries is because of Brexit. Rishi Sunak himself has admitted that. And like I said, the Tories aren't hiding this. Rishi Sunak admitted that. Jeremy Hunt, a few months ago, he admitted that rejoining the single market would improve our economic growth, but it's the wrong way to do it. So he knows that it's damaging the economy. In fact, in 2016, he said Brexit would make our public finances disappear, which would damage the NHS, a cost that we be paid by the most vulnerable and poorest in society. These are people who know they're hurting the UK. So of course you have to fix that if you care even a little bit about the people of the UK.
So basically what you're saying is no politicians really care about the people of the UK.
Well, in 2018, the government's official experts said that no matter what version of Brexit they negotiated, it would make people poorer. So if you continue with Brexit after 2018, you were intentionally making people poorer.
But this whole idea of making people poorer, as I understand it, the ONS have said the economy would be 4%. It's not shrinking by 4%, but it's 4% less big than it would have been.
Yes.
So that isn't, strictly speaking, making people poor. Well, it just means that they're less better off than they would have been. Well, I know I'm splitting hairs here.
Yeah, but given that right now, I think it's half of low-income families are skipping meals to feed their kids, given that the OBR says that this is the sharpest fall in living standards ever recorded, every little bit counts. I don't want to steal from Tesco, but it's kind of important.
Very good. What about the idea, and I do believe that this is a large part as to why some of the problems of Brexit have happened. I mean, you might say that, look, all of these things they were always inevitable. But I think we've had a government that has been partly sidetracked by COVID over the last few years. But I mean, I'm not using that as an excuse. But I think we've also had a government who just don't seem to be aware that things could be different if they had made different decisions. I mean,
such as?
Well, people talk about sort of Brexit opportunities, and they say, well, the government, I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg, I think, has come out with this one, that the government haven't taken advantage of the opportunities that Brexit have provided. But I'm assuming you don't buy that argument at all.
My question is, just show me these opportunities. I mean, we've made some trade deals. None of them come even close to making up for the damage that Brexit has done. When it comes to changing our laws, as you say, many of the Tories are complaining that we haven't been changing our laws as much as we potentially could have done. But the reason for that
there is a point there, though, isn't there? I mean, they just haven't done that.
They haven't done that, but I think the reason why they haven't done that is because they know that the more you diverge from the EU, the more you damage the trade, because it creates more red tape for businesses that try to cross the border. And they know the reason why we're in the EU to begin with was because they know that having similar laws to our main trading market helps our economy, makes trade cheaper, makes products cheaper, improves quality of life.
Do you think Ursula von der Leyen is speaking for many within the EU machine? Because there will also be people who say, well, actually, they don't want us back. They've always thought of us as troublemakers, partly because we were. And therefore, why would they want us back?
This is the one thing that I've always agreed with the Brexiteers to a certain extent on, which is that it is not in the EU's interest to have Brexit. It hurts them as well. They trade with us, so trade barriers hurts them. Hurts us more because we're damaging trade with 27 partners rather than them damaging trade with one partner, but it does hurt them. It is better for them if we are in the single market so they can buy and sell stuff more easily. So there may be some hard feelings, but I think certainly when we move towards being a better country in the years to come, namely by electoral reform, there's lots of speed behind that, and the majority of the Labour Party supports electoral reform. So given that in the UK, the majority of votes have gone to parties that are left of the Conservative Party in every election since the Second World War, we are a much better country than our voting system allows us to show. Once we get there, we'll be a partner that they can deal with. We'll be a better country.
How do we get there? I mean, try and look to the future. Let's create a future counterfactual about if we were... I mean, I love counterfactual history, but I also like looking forward.
Yeah.
Well, how does this come about that Britain does rejoin?
So, for me, the path is when Keir Starmer gets in, as we said, he's a political animal. So he's going to be thinking, all right, the country's been through 14 years of Tory madness with the economy. I'm trying to use a polite word there. And how do I improve people's quality of life? What's the biggest lever that I can pull? As we know, the government's experts say that Brexit is taking 4% of our economy, taking £1,000 from every household in the country. Rejoining the single market is the biggest lever he can pull to get people out of poverty. So he's going to do that. Then we've got, how do we get back into the EU? I don't think that's a fight that you can have with us still having a broken electoral system, a system where in every election a party with a minority of the vote gets a majority of the seats. The majority of votes don't actually have any effect on policy. I think once you do that, then we get to a place where parties can actually say what they really mean, rather than just trying to appeal to the middle all the time in the hopes of winning a majority.
Do you think it depends on whether Keir Starmer gets a stonking majority or not? I mean, I
don't want him to.
Yeah, but you ought to want him to, I think, because if he had a majority of, say, 150 seats, like Tony Blair did in 1997, he had 179, I think. Tony Blair could have done anything he wanted in that first term. He could have committed us to joining the euro and nobody could have done anything about it. And in a sense, I think a lot of this stems back to that decision not to do that. But if Keir Starmer got that kind of majority, he could then introduce PR. I don't think temperamentally... I'm not even sure he's in favour of PR.
No, he's
a
not.
lot of his shadow cabinet.
He's against the majority.
Well, there you go. So that's going to that's
the first fight for us.
That stymies yourself from the start.
But the party overwhelmingly voted for it, like 80%. Yeah. So that's where we are. And as soon as we make the simple point that because the UK, in my view, not really a democracy. If the majority of votes don't count, you can't call it a democracy. And so once we see, all right, the only thing stopping us having a real democracy is Keir Starmer, that's going to be a lot of pressure on him when he gets into number 10.
It's going to be fascinating one way or another, isn't it?
I'm looking forward to it.
Femi, it's been great to see you again. Thank you very much for joining us.